This video is sponsored by Mr. Cool.
This is an exciting moment. After remodeling our house, 18 months, tearing out walls, taking out a chimney, hand building all the custom kitchen cabinets, it's finally time to start building the furniture. So where to start? Admittedly, we have a lot of things on our list, but Ashley and I were talking about what we need right now, and the main thing is a console table behind the couch. Why? Because we have a newborn and we spend a lot of time on the couch, feeding, reading to her, playing with her, and we could use a place for the books, the bottles, the burp cloths. It would be really handy to help keep the clutter at bay. Also, our cat Sloop loves the window back there, and he has very little space to stand. So right now he does this like tightrope walk along the back side of the couch, and while it's impressive, it's also annoying, and we need a place to put like a cat bed or just some place for him to lie down. These are the white oak boards that are left over from the kitchen remodel. They're beautiful, I would like to use them, but there's one problem. The table needs to be 9 feet long, and these are only 6. So how do you make a board longer? I think this book might have the answer. The Complete Japanese Joinery. This is full of all sorts of cool joints, and the one that I found is this one right here. It's called the Kakushi Kanawa Suki, which is a blind dadoed rabbeted scarf joint, meaning that it pulls the boards together this way, and it's structural this way. So, I think this might be the right joint. There's only one problem, and that's that I've never made anything like this before. In Japan, these kinds of joints are designed to hold architectural structures together, and they're used in a really interesting way. They are designed to be tightened up over time if the wood shrinks. They're designed to react to seismic activity, and they're also designed so that you can replace parts as they rot. They don't use any glue, instead they use wedges and keys to hold these sections together, as well as just being incredibly well designed with the registration of the joinery. As a result, it's basically the pinnacle of carpentry around the world. So when I say I've never tried this before, I'm pretty intimidated by this joint. But honestly, that's where I like to be as a woodworker. I like to always be pushing my limits of what I can do. So I decided to just dive in. This is a practice piece. It's on cherry, which is going to be softer than the oak that I'm using. And I followed the layout lines in the guide, in the book. They were pretty straightforward, but it still took me a while to wrap my brain around how all these interlocking parts work. Eventually, I felt like I had gotten there, so I scribed all of my lines with a marking knife and then went over the top of them with a Sharpie so I could see exactly what to remove and what to leave. I just spent over an hour laying this thing out, and it is complicated. There's so many shapes, and it just made my head spin trying to figure it out. But I think I'm there. I think I understand how it goes together, but I don't know if I have the skills to actually cut this out cleanly. I'm not much of a hand tool woodworker, so I may have to go to power tools, but I think it's only right to try it with hand tools and see what happens. So there's two sides to this joint, and one of the sides, you remove most of the material. I figured that was the easiest place to start. I also fortunately got all these Suizan saws. They sent them out to me. They reached out, and it was kind of ridiculous timing. They also sent me a couple of chisels, which will also be put to the test. In this process, I went from being incredibly intimidated by this joint to just being in the zone and enjoying the hand tool time. I am starting to dabble a lot more in hand tools, and obviously I have a bigger collection than I have skills, but it's really, really fun to figure out ways to remove the material and get it flat, get it accurate. The slowness of the process actually kind of helps you with the accuracy, and you feel a lot more connected to the workpiece that you're working on.
One of the tools that I found myself using a lot that I hadn't before is a marking gauge. And this is a very accurate way to create a line. It also kind of scores the fibers of the wood, so it makes it easier for the chisel to register exactly where you want it to. For the most part, I stuck to the lines and was able to get it all with hand tools. But there's one section that I had to go off script, and that was right here. This, I'm imagining there is a specific tool for it. I needed a stopped rabbet on the close side, the side facing me, so it didn't go all the way through. But I could not, for the life of me, figure out how to do it with the tools that I had. Now, when it comes to the tabletop, I'm probably going to switch to a specific router bit, but for this, I really wanted to try and finish it off with the hand tools that I have. That groove ended up being pretty rough, so I refined it with a rasp. So that's the easy side done. Now to move on to the hard side. I started off with a rip cut down the center of the board, and I cut out this dado at the bottom of the board on the back side. With a diagonal cut on the front, I could remove that chunk that I had rip cut before, and the rest of it was chisel work, which honestly was pretty fun. With a bunch of refinement and some test fittings, I felt like it might be time to give it a go and see if the whole thing fit together. The joint was binding on my first attempt, and it didn't seem like it was happening in the front, so I flipped it over and used a rabbeting plane to thin out the tab at the bottom. It seemed a little better now, so I decided to give it another try. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm pretty proud of that. For my first try at this joint, I'd say that's not half bad. And there is a gap. It doesn't fully seat, but it's really consistent all the way around, which means that given some more time with a chisel and a hand plane, I could probably get it to seat. But at this point, I've sunk a whole day into making the test joint, and I want to get on with the actual project. So I'm going to start gluing up panels so we can build the real tabletop. All this white oak has been sitting in my garage for months now, so it was a good idea to touch up that milled edge, make it nice and flat so I get a good glue up. And for that glue up, I'm going to be using my Rockler panel clamps. You guys know that I love these. I use them for every panel glue up in the kitchen. They act as both cauls and clamps, so it keeps your panels super flat without the need for like a ton of clamps. But fair warning, they are spring-loaded. All right. Start again. After a couple hours in the clamps, I popped them out, scraped down the glue, and milled them up. This is definitely going to be a very long table. I made sure everything aligned properly and then measured out where the joint's going to end up. It's starting to dawn on me how much bigger this is than the test joint. Look at this. That's the new one from here to here, and this is the original one. from here to here. This is gonna be a lot of work. Well, I started off measuring out the joint like I did on the other one, but as I was sitting there, I was thinking to myself, I have a more efficient way to do this. I don't know if they use templates in Japan, but it makes a ton of sense to me because this is a mirror image joint, meaning that I can use the same template to lay it out on both sides and know that it's perfect. I also can use it as a router template, and I can use it to cross-reference to make sure that the joint is fitting correctly. I do have to do some layout by hand though. I have to lay out the sides, and that took a little bit of doing, but not nearly as long as it took the first time. So I decided to start using power tools on this for a couple reasons. For one, it's massive, and it would take me a really long time with my skills to do it with hand tools. But I also thought it would be an interesting experiment to see both ways of building it, so both you and me can see if it's possible to build with power tools. It's a joint that was designed before the invention of power tools, and it's really not built to be made by them. I'm doing it in the same order as I did before. I'm cutting the joint that goes all the way through, and for that, it makes it really easy for me to template route it. I did laser cut a new template that doesn't have those little tabs on each end because those tabs don't go all the way through. I thought that by cutting off the maximum amount of material before template routing would help me, but that wasn't the case. Not quite as smooth as I'd hoped. I should have known better, but this little corner right here was unsupported and it chipped out along the grain. And then I had a little bit of a height problem. Right where the bearing was left this little edge here, but that's not a big deal. That can be sanded back. This I'm gonna have to fix somehow. I can either glue a piece on here, like cut it off cleanly, glue a piece on, or I could just move this line back because that's not critical and I'll hand cut that. So I'm not sure which one I'm gonna do, but for now I'm just gonna move on and gotta trim out the bottom here and remove half of this material. I pulled off that router template and then I could start hogging out material underneath. I'm using a dado stack with my Rockler Precision miter gauge and just slowly nibbling away material until I get to the bottom of the joint. Switching over to the other side of the joint, I used a router to start pulling material out from there. Now I'm going to have to make sure this is really precise, so I use these setup blocks to get it as precise as possible, and as soon as my router was honed in, I could start munching away material. While you guys watch me remove that material, I wanted to give you a quick update. And it's not something that I did during the house remodel, but it's not something that I put in the house. And I get a lot of questions about it, but not from the comments. I actually get questions from my relatives. Ashley's mom, sister, uncle, my brother, they've all asked me, how well does the Mr. Cool work and how is it held up throughout the year? Mr. Cool is the sponsor of this week's video, and that gives me a chance to update you guys and tell you what I told them. For context, last May, I installed an 18,000 BTU Mr. Cool mini split in the upstairs apartment. And now that we've gone through both a brutal summer and a chilly winter, I can finally give you a full report, and the thing did great. I got it installed right before a historic heat wave here in Seattle, and thank God that I did because that space is full of windows, which means it feels like a greenhouse, and up until now, I haven't had a good way to cool it. Now, the Mr. Cool keeps the whole space cool and comfortable all summer long.
Oh, it's so cold.
In the winter, same story. Warm, cozy, and reliable. But that's not the best part. The best part is that it's DIY. I just followed the instructions, both written and video, and it was really straightforward. The refrigerant lines come pre-charged, so you don't need to hire an HVAC crew to get the job done. That alone saved us a ton of money.
If you're looking to add AC and heat to your home or garage, Mr. Cool is one of the best, most reliable, most affordable options out there, especially since you can do it yourself. So check out the links in the description below for more info. Thanks, Mr. Cool. Now, let's get back to it.
With that material removed, I can go back over it with a chisel and bring it all the way to the line. I still have the tabs to cut out, but first I wanted to see how the depth was working out and if the two sides aligned.
It's a little high, but that's okay. I can plane it down. I'd rather it be too high than too short.
I was sitting about a 1/16 proud, and so using a hand plane, I brought it back down. The dado stack leaves a little bit of chatter. It's not perfect, and I actually was able to use this as kind of a depth gauge. As I would see the chatter disappear, I could tell that I was getting smooth and closer to the depth that I wanted.
All right, this joint is about 75% done, but I need a router bit to finish it off, which is kind of frustrating. I want to test it out and see how it works, but for now, I'm gonna have to shift gears. That router bit should be here tomorrow, but let's start working on the base. So for the table base, I'm thinking a trestle table. So like you've got a Parsons table, which got legs at all four corners. A trestle table has sort of an hourglass shape to its legs. It has like a central leg that flares out to a foot at the bottom, and then it flares out to a bracket at the top that supports the tabletop. It's a cool look. It's kind of Japanese inspired, which makes sense with this joint, and it's also gonna give me a chance to do some cool joinery.
This is some quarter-sawn white oak that I've got left over from building the kitchen island, and it had a couple of defects in it, these little bug holes, but it's kind of perfect for this because I don't need to use the full piece, and I'm going to be cutting sections out of it to make the feet out of. I'm going to start from the bottom of the table and work my way up with the milling. I'm just going to rough mill stuff out so that I can kind of see how it works and see if I like the proportions. I was able to get the cross brace and all the legs out of the offcuts from the tabletop. I set up a stop block on my miter station and cut the legs down to length. Now this miter station is one of the best things I've ever built. It's so handy, and I do have plans for it on my website, along with plans for most of the things in my shop. My router table, my table saw storage, my table saw outfeed table, my workbench. All of these have plans. Go check them out, almfab.com/plans. With the legs, the feet, and the cross brace all cut out, I decided I'd just clamp it all together. I was really curious because this is a 9-foot long table that's only 9 inches wide, whether or not this would be stable enough at the height. So I decided to just use some clamps, clamp it all together, and get a feel for it, see if proportionally it looked correct. I'm designing on the fly, so I don't really know if it's gonna look good or not.
Feels pretty good.
I like the look, and it's plenty stable, so now it's time to decide on the joinery. And I think the joinery is kind of key to making sure that it stays really stable. I want some nice tight joints, and I also think that since the tabletop is knocked together, it might be cool to do an entirely glueless table where all the parts fit together into slots with tabs. And I guess I used glue on the tabletop, but I think a good challenge for the rest of this build is to not use any glue to hold it together. Let's see if I can pull it off. So I cut these dado slots in both of the feet using the router table and the fence, and I just flipped it over end so they're even on both sides. Now I want to cut some slots on the top, and so I tape these together so they're just a little bit more stable against the fence. And what this slot's gonna do is it's gonna allow me to slot the legs into it, and it will hide the joint. The leg material was a little bit tight, and that's fine. I'd rather it be a little bit too tight than too loose. So I use my drum sander to sand down the legs. It's way easier than widening the slot with the router bit, and this way I can dial it in, and I also have a nice sanded surface, so I don't have to worry about when I sand later it getting too small. The fit I'm looking for is just enough to hold it into place, but easy to remove and press in. This was perfect. To cut the corresponding slots in the legs, I'm using my tenon jig, which is just a couple sheets of plywood screwed together, and it keeps it nice and square as I run it through the table saw. I flip the workpiece around and cut the same cut on the other side, and these are my outside cuts. After that, I can adjust the table saw fence, shift it over, and nibble away the remainder of the material. With all 4 of the bottom slots cut out, I lowered the table saw blade and cut out the top slots. These are just a little bit shallower, but the cut is exactly the same as the other side. The next thing that I need to do on these legs is cut a couple of dados. These are going to be slots that go across them, and they're going to support the cross brace on the top as well as the bottom. And this is a pretty critical part of the joinery. It's what prevents the whole table from racking, and if I don't get this joint tight enough, the table will definitely wobble. To make this cut, I'm using the Rockler Precision Miter Gauge again, and this miter gauge has a nice flip down stop, so I can accurately cut the dado slot exactly the same on every piece. On the opposite side, I use the table saw fence, and this one doesn't have to be quite as accurate because I haven't cut this cross brace yet. I double checked to make sure the bottom cross brace fit, and that looked great. If you look at a lot of tables and chairs like I do, and you wonder why it's very rare to see a flat board directly against the floor. Instead, there's always some sort of foot. The reason is because a flat board will eventually warp and twist, and if it does that on one side or both sides, it can cause the furniture to rock. So it's always best to cut a relief underneath. And while I still have these legs taped together, I also decided to do a little design thing and add a bit of an angled cut. This is just a 10-degree cut, and it makes it look a little less chunky. I'm really happy with the shape of these feet. They kind of surprised me. They look kind of Frank Lloyd Wright-y to me. I don't know if that's the oak or the slotted joinery or what, but I'm really happy with the design. Now I get to check to see if those legs fit. And they slot in so well. The next step is to add in the cross brace, and that was also a pretty nice fit.
Oh my God, I'm so happy that these came together. And now I'm gonna turn my attention to the top, which I noticed something. It's flaring out at the top. My original plan was to use this stock to slot in here, but there's nothing to hold it in this direction. So I still have the router table set up. I'm gonna take the off-cut piece of the quarter sawn white oak that's a little bit wider, and I'm just gonna cut that on the router table in the same way so that I capture these ends. And then I also have an issue with this piece. I mean, I could make it just the same length as this, but I think it looks cooler if it sticks out a little bit and has, you know, it's cut back so it sort of matches these brackets. But I'm still limited by the stock that I have, which is all 6 feet long. This is 6 feet long. So I have to make another scarf joint. I don't think I'm gonna make it quite as complicated as the top, but I do think it's good to make a good strong joint in the middle there so that I don't have any weak spots. But first, let's go over to the router table and cut out these brackets.
This is going to look very familiar. It's very similar, the same size as one of the legs. The only difference is that I'm cutting out those top and bottom slots on both sides because I'm going to then rip this stock in half. With those split in half, I can remove this center piece. Now I'm leaving it on the other one because there's no cross piece that cuts through it, but you'll see in a minute the cross piece is going to sit right here, so I don't need it. It's easy to remove with a chisel. It's actually very fragile, so I have to be careful with the feet. So that channel that you see right there in between is what the cross brace is going to sit in. And I'm going to do a half lap joint here. So I need to cut a notch out of these pieces. And again, I'm going to use the table saw with the dado stack. The width cut on the half lap is not critical. Really, the depth of it is important, but the width doesn't really matter. I would rather it be a little bit wide so that it's easier for me to get the cross brace in. In order for the original dados to fit exactly the same on the bottom as the top, I left these brackets long. Now I can cut them down, and I use the measurement off of the top flare of the foot to determine that width. I always think it's a good idea in design to repeat measurements throughout it. It just makes it look more cohesive. To make this piece look less chunky, I cut a bevel on the bottom using the bandsaw and refine that with the drum sander. Those were looking great, and now it's time to cut the corresponding cross brace. And like I mentioned before, I only have 6 foot lengths here, so I need to make another scarf joint. Now this one's not going to be nearly as complicated as the one on the top, but it operates under the same principles. It's just a little bit simpler. Since this doesn't have any of the keys or tabs in the other joint, I figured I'd just put a hole through the center of it, and I can put a square peg through that, which will prevent it from twisting, hopefully. I squared up the holes using a chisel, and then I hammered it back together. I used that same drill bit to drill a hole through the center, and then I squared up the hole inside of there. In hindsight, I probably should have done this as a draw bore, and I think it would be stronger if I offset this hole a little bit. I might do that at the very end, but for right now, I'm too excited to get that other joint together, so I just did a direct hole all the way through. The joint looked pretty good sanded up, and then I could cut it down to length. I decided to offset that piece so it's not dead center and right underneath the other joint. I set it to the side by 1/3. I added in the half lap on the top, and then trimmed a bevel on the ends so that they matched the brackets. I cleaned up the rough edges with a hand plane, and then I can check to see if it all fits. Router bit showed up. All right, looks pretty good. It's not the most expensive router bit, which makes me a little nervous, but it's only got to work once. So it's a slot cutting bit with the bottom bearing on it. It's the only one that I could find that had the bearing in the right location and was the right width and depth. So fingers crossed, hopefully it works well. The base is done, so really all I have to do is get this joint together to pull the whole table together. But I just really don't want to screw it up at this phase. Once the router bit was installed, I also added this little piece of MDF on the inside so that it doesn't tip down, and this on the outside so that it don't get chipped out. I also added this support because when I cut the piece on the bandsaw, it was really treacherous. It's a lot of weight, this white oak, and I have a little bit of extra room on the end, so I made this kind of peg leg for it. I also had to take all of my accessories off the tabletop because this thing is so gigantic. Here we go. Let's see how it does.
I messed up. Yep. I switched where the dado stops, which is the whole reason that I ordered this bit. Okay. Let's take you in closer here. So it's supposed to cut the slot on this side instead of cutting the slot on this side. And now that slot's cut. So this was kind of the whole reason that I ordered the router bit, which is pretty dumb. But it cut well. It's great. If I just paid attention, I even drew it out. So I'm going to recut this. I'll glue a piece into here. It's not perfect, but you know, these projects rarely are. So yeah, it's really not a big deal. I'm just kind of mad at myself.
It was easy enough to recut the leading edge of the slot. Then I could cut out a piece of scrap to fill in the section that I messed up. Unfortunately, that meant to break my rule of not using wood glue again, but it's okay. This is a good solution. It's barely noticeable. I slotted it in and left it to dry. In the meantime, I can cut the other 2 slots that need to be added into some of these joints to make them work, and finish up these notches with some hand tools. When the glue dried on my repair, I trimmed off the excess and then sanded it back. It honestly was barely noticeable once everything was said and done. That piece gets another notch on the opposing side, and the slot gets finished off with the chisel as well. I'm almost ready for the test fit, but I first need to cut out this dado on the back side. That creates that tongue that registers everything together. The palm router worked great for this. I just kind of wish I had hooked up dust collection. So now, after hours and hours of making this joint, the question is, does it fit together?
Ooh. Oh, it's gonna go. It's gonna go. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
What a relief. I mean, honestly. And with a couple hits from the mallet on the other end, it tightened up really well. So I'll admit, I had a contingency plan this whole time, that if it didn't work, I had extra length in these boards and I could always cut it again. Now that it was fitted, I can cut them down to length and feel confident that this table's actually gonna work. And if you remember from that router bit, I had that chip out on the inside, so I did decide to trim that bit off. I think gluing a piece on would just be too fragile and it would probably break again. And of course, one of the last elements in this tabletop is the key, and I figured it had to be something nice, so I found a bit of rosewood in my collection. It'll be a great way to show off the joinery. There's not a lot of information in that book about how these keys are made, so I called my buddy Chris, who runs a channel called Cow Dog Craftworks here on YouTube. He's very knowledgeable about Japanese hand tools and Japanese joinery, and he was saying that a lot of times these keys are not square on the ends. They're flared in different directions and wedged to make sure that it drives into specific corners and stuff. I do have a gap in one of the corners, and I want to make sure that it drives home as best as possible. So I put a little bevel on the end of the key. It's just a couple degrees. Now I'm going to match the mortise to the key. And before I hammer home this key and it's permanently locked together, I decided to chamfer the edges of the joinery. That'll give it a little bit of a shadow line and you'll be able to see it. It'll make this tabletop look a lot cooler. While I was at it, I figured I might as well disassemble the whole base and get that all sanded up and get all the edges chamfered as well. With everything pulled apart, sanded, chamfered, I'm ready for finish, and I'm applying Rubio Monocoat 5% Mist. This is the same stuff that we used in the kitchen cabinets, and I've got a bit of it left over. Since that smaller scarf joint was apart anyway, I figured I might as well do that drawbore and make it a little bit stronger. I cut a peg out of rosewood. It was slightly larger than the walnut peg I had before, and I trimmed it out in opposing directions. So it should create kind of like a spring in the middle of it. It'll be hard to drive in there, but in theory, it will be a lot stronger and pull it tighter together. It definitely pulled it together tighter than the last one, but it wasn't perfect, and there's still a gap there. But that has more to do with me just not cutting one of the sides very well, so I'll just chalk that up to experience. Hopefully next time I try this, I can get it a little bit better, but it is plenty strong and looks pretty darn good. To bring out the beauty in the rosewood, I added some of this Bumblechutes all natural wood finish, and now it's finally time to see if that joint works or not. One of the last things that needed to be addressed was how to attach the top to the base. And I was going to do dowels because I've done that before, but I felt like this table, because of its length, just could use some fasteners. Kind of hated to put screws into this thing, but I think it was the right decision, especially having a future toddler around. I think it's good that this thing is nice and secure. The brackets had to go in first, and then the cross brace on top of that, then the screws, and then I can hammer on the base. I can't tell you guys how much I enjoyed this build. This was so much fun, and it's really satisfying the way that it goes together. I am going to do plans for this. I have them on pre-sale right now up on my website if you're interested in building one yourself. You don't have to do the fancy Japanese joinery, but I do cover that in the plans. I also cover how to shrink the table down. It's very versatile, so if you have a different sized couch, you can build it for the space that you have. That's awesome. Is it sad to put this thing behind a couch? Maybe. I really love the look of it. I kind of went overboard on the base design just because I wanted a challenge. And speaking of challenges, I'm really happy that I tried Japanese joinery. It's something that's intimidated me for a really long time. And while it was challenging, it wasn't insurmountable. And I'd encourage other people to try it as well. But we didn't build this table to make me happy. We built it for Sloop. And let's see if Sloop likes it or not. Thanks to Mr. Cool for sponsoring this video. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters. You guys are the best, and I'll catch you on the next one.